Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to another episode of Sean's Movie Crusades. My name is Sean Wasserkrug, and today we're going to be reviewing a film that has been on my most anticipated list of 2020 since I heard about it, and that is the 2020 adaptation of the 1983 book and remake of the 1990 film, The Witches. Now, like I said, for me, this was my number 3 most anticipated film of 2020. Which is a very sad list now because pretty much almost over half of that list is not coming out in 2020 anymore because of COVID. This one was originally supposed to be released in theaters as well. I think it was supposed to get released actually around the holiday season, but instead it got moved to HBO Max. I personally have never read the actual book done by Roald Dahl, which was in 1983. But as a kid, I was a huge fan and lover of the 1990 adaptation film with Angelica Houston as the Grand High Witch. I loved this movie as a kid. I loved the atmosphere of it and the practical effects of it and everything about it with Angelica Houston as the witch and the boys being turned into mice and just the way Angelica Houston's witch looked the way she did. I was a huge fan of this film as a child. So when I heard that they were making a remake in 2020 with Robert Zemeckis obviously at the helm of directing with Anne Hathaway as the Grand High Witch with Stanley Tucci and Octavia Spencer, I obviously got super excited for this. So it was definitely one of my most anticipated of the year. But like with most anticipated films, you put the stakes so high for it and it just doesn't ever quite reach it. So here's hoping that this one did that. So let's go ahead and jump into the review and see exactly what I thought of The Witches 2020. Now, the main plot for The Witches, if people who have never read the book or seen the 1990 adaptation, this one does, for the most part, follow the same plot as the book and the original film. The story tells a scary, fun, imaginative tale of a 7-year-old boy who has a run-in with some real-life witches with his grandmother. That's basically as basic as you can get. On top of the fact that while he has this run-in with the witches, him and a buddy get turned into a mouse. So, I mean, if you didn't know that, I mean, the trailers literally give it away for you. But that's basically the general plot of The Witches. Now, like I said, what made The Witches 1990 so great was Angelica Houston's performance as the witch, and the practical effects of the little boys as mice, and the effects of how the witches looked, and certain story aspects in the film itself. Now, with Zemeckis' 2020 version, Anne Hathaway does a really good job as the Grand High Witch. The main problem I would have with Anne Hathaway's performance as the Grand High Witch is when she is talking in her witch voice, it is very, very hard to understand. You basically almost need subtitles because all the witches in this film, when they're talking in their witch voice, is like that kind of a voice the whole time. And then you add a German accent on top of it, which Anne Hathaway's human part is speaking, which even that's not even, it's a very thick German accent, not necessarily probably a more of a realistic German accent, but you add that with the witch voice, it's hard to understand Anne Hathaway at certain points in the film overall. But in terms of playing the role that Angelica Houston made, to me, famous, because I think a lot of people know her performance of this one in 1990, I think Anne Hathaway does a really solid job. The big problem you also run into is that there are no real practical effects in this like it was in the 1990 version. Clearly, everything witch-like or anything looking like that with Anne Hathaway's character is clearly CGI, which was kind of a bummer. I was really hoping for more of the practical effects like the 1990 version compared to how most films are today, where everything's just, let's just put a CGI, thing on there and we'll, do it in post, which is her effect of looking scary, done well. Yes, for a lot of children, Anne Hathaway's character is going to be terrifying, whether it be her arms or her mouth. The effects are there to look scary, but does it ever match the level of what Anjelica Huston's effects of the witch looked like in the original version? Absolutely not. Stanley Tucci as basically the hotel manager. He's Stanley Tucci. If you love Stanley Tucci, you'll love him in this. And just like most films with Stanley Tucci, you just want more Stanley Tucci. Definitely not enough Stanley Tucci in this film, but he's playing a certain role, and that role is only going to have so many scenes in the film. But what we do see of Tucci in this film, he does a solid job. Jazier Bruno plays the hero boy, or Charlie, in the film. He's solid in it as well. Definitely comes out more of an actual character once he is turned into a mouse. And of course, Octavia Spencer does a real solid job as the grandmother. Cast-wise, everyone, is there times where there's some overacting done in the film? Absolutely, it's a kid's film after all. But I think the performances all did a decent job. With Zemeckis' eye, it's very colorful, it's very bright. Just wish we wouldn't have done CGI and done more practical effects with it, because I know Zemeckis is capable of having that practical effects imagery. But just going the CGI route, really, especially when the kid, especially when Charlie turns into a mouse, or even certain witches turn into a mouse, it's just, I didn't really like the visual for it. I feel like they could have done a better visual compared to what we got in the 1990 version, which is a lot more scarier of a version overall. And then there are certain story elements that changed, such as, if anyone remembers the 1990 version, one of the scariest aspects of that film, outside of Anjelica Huston's full-on witch outfit, was the story about the woman, or the girl in the painting. That's all I'm going to say. If you want to know about the girl in the painting, watch the 1990 version. But that story got changed to something completely different, which, if done correctly, could have been horrific. But it just does not work the right way, or it doesn't work to the same effect as the girl in the painting story. So that was kind of a disappointment, because that was one of those stories that you heard in the movie that just stuck with you as a kid, way past the film's end credits. And in this one, it kind of just comes off ridiculous. They could have gone real dark with it, and I was actually hoping they would have gone real dark with it, but today's day and age, you decided to just more kind of trail it off as kind of not necessarily a joke, but a little more kind of kid gloves on there compared to what it was in the 90s. So it was a real missed opportunity there. And then the end of the film, and I mean, like, once the first start of the credits roll, I didn't really like the end of the film. I didn't really like what they did with it, because that's completely different from the book ending and the 1990 version. It was just really weird, and just kind of felt out of place from the rest of the film. But nonetheless, going to overall thoughts for this film, it's solid. It was fine. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. Is it better than the 90s version? Hell no. So, I mean, when it comes to which movie should you watch, I would 100% go with Anjelica Huston's 1990 version, because I feel like it surpasses the 2020 version in every way. Oh, yeah, and I almost forgot. There's a third mouse in this. For the life of me, cannot remember if it was 2 mice or 3 mice in the 1990s version, but there's 3 mice in this one. And like I said, you have Bruno, the chubby English kid. You have Charlie, the main character, and then there's a third mouse voice or character is Daisy. And instead of having a child voice this character, they got Kristen Chenoweth to voice this character, and her voice obviously is not a child's voice. Yes, she has a very high-pitched voice, but it is not a child's voice. And when you find out in the film that she's a child who had been turned 4 months prior, it just is off-putting, and it just doesn't sound right, because you hear Bruno and you hear Charlie talk, and then you hear Daisy talk, and you can tell Daisy's a woman. She is not a child. And so it's like the decision to put Kristen Chenoweth in that voice role instead of an actual girl, definitely a weird choice and a weird decision. I don't back it. I don't think that was a smart choice by Zemeckis, but still, nonetheless, like I said, it's a solid film. It's definitely worth a one watch, and especially if your kids like it, great. But I would show them the 90s version over this version any day of the week. But going to my overall score, I'm going to give The Witches 2020 a 6.8 out of 10. I think it was a solid attempt, but ultimately the CGI, some of the director choices that they chose just don't match quite up to the 1990s film. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you guys did, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys feel like this review is worth sharing, go ahead and hit that share button. But most importantly, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos that pop up on Sean's Movie Crusades. And of course, don't forget to follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Coming up next, I said this on the last review, but I forgot that The Witches came out today. The next film coming up is we have Bill Murray and Rashida Jones on The Rock, so be on the lookout for that. And until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.